Hello there, and welcome to Delightful Dissent. It's episode 8, and today's assumption is it's my responsibility to make things happen. And I'm really excited about this one because I think responsibility is a seriously misunderstood idea, and it's really exciting to get into. So today's guest is Lana Jelenjev. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Matthew.
It's great to have you here. And just a quick explainer about Delightful Dissent if you haven't seen too many of these episodes before or heard too many of these episodes before. I'm interested in challenging the deep assumptions that we kind of take for granted that are important to have because they let us do what we need to do, but can also hold us back significantly. And the guests I'd like to have on are people who are challenging those assumptions in some way, either through what they do or directly they help other people do them, all sorts of different things that are really about thinking about things in a fundamentally different way. And for me, each episode is a chance for us, yes, to explore a specific assumption that is probably holding you back or might well be holding you back that you can then approach in a slightly different way that my guest has been working on and exploring themselves for a while. But equally, it's to model and show what this process is and this practice is. It's to really get it out there and demystify it a bit, because I'd like everyone to be able to challenge assumptions as part of their work, and that to be a normal part of everyone's work. I'd like you to be able to see what this process is, and so you can go out there and do it for yourself and make some delightful dissent yourself. And the name Delightful Dissent really comes from the idea that, yeah, we're challenging things. We're saying, no, this isn't quite right, but we're doing so in a positive way. We're not trying to say, I'm right, you're wrong, and that's a problem. It's an exploration, and so we can all come to a better understanding of what it is that we're really working with and what we're doing in the world, because it's not always straightforward, and engaging with some of that complexity and some of that messiness is a really important thing for me. And I it's really fundamentally important for everyone. So this is genuinely live. Stuff may go wrong. We've had a few things before where it hasn't quite worked as expected, or we've had interruptions. And equally, it is a deep, challenging conversation. You may find that we explore some difficult topics, and there is no requirement not to use strong language. So, we're talking about serious things with serious energy behind them. So you might encounter some strong language as well. So this is just a warning for you that, particularly if you're watching live, we don't entirely know where this is going. So just be warned, be aware that that's what's going on. And this is about engagement. This is very much a community thing. Primarily a conversation today between me and Lana, but it's also a conversation with you in the community. So if you're watching live, please do share comments and ask questions. We'll leave some space at the end to explore any specific and general questions. But if you've got something specific that comes up whilst we're talking, please do share it, and we'll bring it in where we can. So yeah, please do join in as much as possible. If you're watching or listening to the recording, please do share comments and get in touch with me or the guests as much as possible, because yeah, this is a conversation. So please feel part of it. So today's guest, as I said, Lana Jelenjev. We first met through the Happy Startup School, I think it was, and we kind of had this shared interest in technology and innovation and that kind of space. But what really struck me about Lana was how her incredible intuitive sense of how to connect with people and how to connect people as well, and kind of bring people together. And I thought that was, really made me want to have her as a guest on this show today. So Lana, could I ask you please to introduce yourself a little bit and the kind of people that you work with, please?
Yeah, thank you. This question of who am I is always a puzzle in how to answer. I would say depending on which hat I'm putting in. So I'm the poster child of a multi-potentialite. I have different programs, different initiatives and activities that I'm part of. And I would say the red thread around all this is my love for learning and my love for community. So most of the programs and projects that I'm involved in are really around the social civic or social impact um, work. And most of the people that I work with are either organizations or small and medium enterprises who are challenging the system, with their programs or with their services.
That's great. And how do you what do you kind of help them with? What kind of things?
Yeah,
What kind
so
of space?
most of the time, like I said, depending on which organization that I'm part of, like with the work that I'm doing with Dreams Do, the client partners that we have are organizations who are trying to navigate their world into the online learning space. So
Mm,
helping them design the learning experience for their programs online. And also how to create learning communities within their learning programs. So that's one area that I can definitely share a lot of pointers on. And then with the other, like the foundation that I'm part of, Shift Foundation, we provide workshops on topics such as healing histories. So on a very deep personal space of exploring around trauma and collective trauma. So
mm,
different projects, different ways of engaging with the topic. Yet I would say the main, the main qualifier around this is how I see myself as that, bridge, or like a pebble that you throw in a pond and that just cause ripples, just cause changes. So I'm very much fond of looking into transformation and changes.
that's great. No, it's really interesting. I love how many people are kind of doing this work now and drawn to it, but with all of these different experiences and skills, and it's really great to be in this community of people doing this work. So yeah, thank you for joining us. Before we kind of really get stuck into the assumption, I like to ask guests to share a quote that supports, that gives them a bit of support in this, because we are striking out into something, we're pushing against something, and it's very often the case that we're not doing this alone, even though it can often feel like it. And a quote can often capture and give us some support. So, is there a quote that you'd like to share with us
Yeah.
around this assumption?
I'd like to give the quote of one of my favorite authors, Leo Buscaglia, and so he's the author of the book I read when I was 17 before I turned 18, and that book was Living, Loving, and Learning. So that was my first self help book, and that totally changed a lot of my views. So he wrote, "We don't love to be loved; we love to love. Perhaps love is the process of my leading you gently back to yourself, not to whom I want you to be, but to who you are."
Mhm. That's wonderful. I think it really captures so much of how we engage with the world in a positive way, how we engage with our expectations, and how we help others and support others in that, and that we support others best when we don't require them to meet our expectations necessarily.
Oh,
No. What does it mean for you? How does it how does it
yeah, totally. The word expectation really landed strongly for me. If I think of all the times that I felt frustration or dissatisfaction, it's mainly because I have this, held expectations that I put on somebody else, and that causes the tension and that causes the friction. So for me, really going with where are my expectations coming from? Why am I expecting these things? What is it that would that would make me feel safe in a relationship, or what is it that would make me feel confident in a relationship? So it started off that, deeper exploration, so it's not just
Mm,
the expectations, but what's underneath that layer of expectations. So when I read this, I was very young, and at the time I had such a gripe with the world, with how things are going. My mom was terminally ill at that point. So you can imagine, an
Mm,
18-year-old really just trying to find ways into the adult world, and at the same time having to care for, a parent, an ailing parent. So for me, when I started this process of just really looking at what does it really mean to love someone without these expectations, and it really took a long time for me to get into that fully. Not until I had my own kids as well, and also have my own, relationship, my own partner, and then that's when it really sank in of, oh, it really takes a lot of what's this it really takes a lot of process in loving someone that way, of unconditionally, and not being tied up to expectations.
mm. And I think this idea, this has shown up in a couple of the other episodes already that we've had, is this relationship between love and work is a really interesting one. And these ideas that work is this kind of cold place where there isn't space for love. This isn't that isn't part of the thing. Whereas for me, actually, we're human all the time, and we're working for bigger reasons than just to get paid. Um, and it's much more like understanding how we're relating to that and how we're working with that is a really important part of this. And we do have these challenges, we do have things that it's definitely very helpful for us to do, and there are serious consequences if we don't do them. And how we approach those in a loving way, in that open way, I think is really not something that I was taught, certainly, in any of anything prepared me for that, in a sense.
Yeah, I can totally relate with what you said. We come to the world very much unprepared, especially as adults. We just breeze through life because that's what we're accustomed to, or that's what our culture told us to do. I know for myself, coming in from the Philippines, we're in for us. Our education is the only means for us to get out of our financial situation. So it was strongly, strongly placed upon us culturally that you only have to excel, and that was the only framing. So this idea of, okay, that work is very much different from real life, has been perpetuated, because that, okay, at work you just have to do and excel, 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 and then in the real life, then that's when you can relax or have
Yeah,
fun.
yeah,
So there's that dichotomy of, oh, putting life and work in different lenses, and like what you said, it really did not work well with me at all.
yeah.
And perhaps like you, I would say I can never even picture myself making that distinction again. Once you get it out from your system, it's so difficult to get back into that framing.
I think for me, it's like once you become aware of it. My experience is I think it's going on for many people, actually, many of us, and some of us are always more sensitive to some things like that than others. But I think it's there for many of us, and once you've seen it, it's
Yeah.
not really possible to unsee it, and that changes an awful lot of things, and can lead to some temporary practical difficulty. It's difficult to then engage in the way that you did before,
Yeah.
with things. So I think this leads us really nicely into the assumption that it's my responsibility to make things happen. And I think for me, this idea of us as being effective, us as there being things that we need to do, and for ourselves and for other people, that we have this, this need to do specific things, and we need to do them well. And if we don't, that's a significant problem and a reflection on us. And I think I see an awful lot out there where it really is this, this idea of it's your choice to make yourself happy, and it's all a function of your choice, and that you're 100% in control of your experience and all of this. I see this message over and over, and I also see it played out in the way that we approach work, and the need for leaders to be in control and to have this direction, and that you have to have this certainty, and you have to convey this certainty, and all of this stuff. And so I think it's a really strong thing in there. And what's always interesting about these things is there's some pretty big elements of truth in there, but it's not the complete picture. And I think, for you, how does it show up? Where do you see this assumption showing up the most?
Yeah. So if I think about, it's my responsibility to make things happen, one of the memories that really comes up for me very, very strongly was the time when I had to decide. This is gonna put it in. I had to decide not to have my mom in the hospital anymore. So we were told by the oncologist that the cancer has spread. Even if we operated, the chances of recovery is going to be very limited. And at that time, it was it's between me and my brother. But since I'm the one who were mostly in the hospital and engaging with the doctor, so it was really a decision to say, hey, we bring her home. And that for me was also a period of unlearning that, if I were me at that age, I would have done things differently. I would have consulted others in the decision making, because for quite a long time I felt the burden of that responsibility. And I felt the burden of, it was a big decision that I had to make, and I had to live with that decision. And this is also why when you were talking, like, this question about responsibility, it goes so deep within us, mainly because we have, like for myself, cultural obligations that have really been embedded in me. And the thought of, okay, making decisions, doing things, making things happen, for me, that was the only framing that I knew of. There's nobody else that's going to do things for me, so I have to be the one to do it for myself. So this is something that, it's like, that was how I grew up with. And when when we were having this discussion, that this just idea of, if only like my 43-year-old self turning 44 would say, okay, how would you have approached that situation differently? It would have been a totally different scenario. It might be the same decision, but the ways around it would most likely have been different.
I think there's a whole load of really interesting stuff in that, and that how heavy responsibility weighs. I think, and that can feel true in business, in work, and in personal decisions. We're particularly for leaders in organizations, we feel responsible for a huge amount of people's income and people's well-being. If not, we're just responsible, even at work, we're responsible for our own income, which provides for our family and helps our family and helps us carry on being, do what we want to do. So these decisions are really, really hard. And I think that's acknowledging how hard this stuff is, that, you don't have to have a ready answer for me, is a really important thing. And I sense in what you were saying, the importance of not having to come to the decision on your own, almost not having to frame the question on your own.
Yeah.
Because for me, it feels like, it's okay to ask for something specific. It's okay to come up with, like, to give a statement that's a kind of yes, no. And it's like, am I right or am I wrong in this?
Yeah.
And that's okay. You can ask you can ask other people that. But what you can't do is explore what the question is.
Exactly. And especially questions that are very heavy, questions that are a matter of life or death, a matter of principles, a matter of values, things from my experience. One of the things that I really learned along the way is the value of just asking others, and having others weigh in with their opinion. um, this has really helped me a lot, not just on a personal sense, but also professionally, of being able to weigh in. Is this something that I have to do, or is this the best course of action? Because when I get into this mode of, oh, it's my responsibility, I can then also not get into, what are the other perspectives around me.
Mm.
So this is
Mm.
really a big reframing that I personally have, experienced in life, of how can I do this? How can I do things differently?
I think that, thinking about it as a mode of thinking, where we fall into this kind of loop almost, because it becomes, for me certainly, I experience it as like a feedback loop. It kind of, you end up in your own perspective, so you end up feeling more responsible for
Yeah.
things within that, and you kind of it kind of becomes this difficult cycle to break out of. And I think the idea of, recognizing it in myself is really important, and also recognizing it when other people feel that, and the reaching out to help, and what good helping looks like is kind of the other side of this. I think, it's like, how do we help others in a positive way? Because when we get stuck in this responsibility thing, it's like responsibility is this big lump thing, and I've got all of it, or I transfer all of it,
Yeah,
instead of it being like, well, we can kind of share this and
exactly.
carry
Yeah.
this together and explore this together, and that makes it easier in general. It makes it much easier.
Yeah, I love you that you use the word share. For quite some time, that is also something that helped me frame this. That asking for support is actually sharing that responsibility with others, so that they also would know how to, say, give space, or make these decisions, or be able to have the faculty to get through this experiences. So for me, it's actually, when we ask for help from people, we're actually helping them have these skills for themselves as well.
Mm.
So it's not just you being helped, but also the other person.
Yeah, and I think there's well, one of the really big things I kind of mentioned at the top of the show, that there's something really big around responsibility that I think is misunderstood. And I'd be really interested to see how this goes over for you. Is that when I grew up, it felt like responsibility was the same thing as fault. Was an obligation. So if you have a responsibility to something, you must
Yes.
satisfy that. You must do that.
Yeah.
And I think, for me, that is a fundamental misunderstanding of responsibility, because for it to be responsibility, there has to be choice.
Yeah.
It is the ability to respond. It is the ability to choose a different pathway than the obvious, than the straight ahead, than where things are going. And that is so important in understanding how we're being responsible, because we're not being responsible just jumping straight to a solution. We're being reactive. We're reacting to this. And that, I think we've, and it's almost like, if you don't respond in a certain way, then there's a problem with
Yeah.
you. You're at fault. And I think that is a really, really deep assumption in the way that we relate to the world, and around leadership, and around our own self-efficacy, and how we support each other. And it walls us off. It disconnects us from other people.
Yeah, exactly. I totally resonate with that idea of, when we think of responsibility in this lens, that it's really coming in from a demand energy. This is how you should be doing this, or this is a must. You don't have any escape. And when I personally, that's how I work. When I feel that, I immediately repel against it. Even
Mm,
more, they're like, I'm not doing this. um and this is also how I see it, not just with myself, but also, say, for example, parenting. We see that with kids. If we place that demand energy upon them, all the more that they would rebel. It's the same with managing teams. When we put in more of that, of like authoritarian, this is how you have to be doing things, there's less productivity. The entire culture within a team is very different. Uh,
Mm,
so I I personally think that when we think of responsibility, and you've said it already, the responsibility, there should be choices in how do we respond to it in the first place.
mm,
How go about it in the first place. And I think this is that linear way of thinking that, oh, is there a problem? Then somebody needs to make a solution.
mm,
Um, but there is also another way of, oh, there's a problem, and who can we invite to make the solutions.
mm.
So there's that form of how can we invite others in this, in taking in the responsibility.
Yeah, and for me, it's how can we use those diverse perspectives in actually framing a better question?
Yeah.
How can we bring that together? And I think one of the things that jumped out for me in that is, yeah, if you push this on a team, you either get rebellion or you get disengaged conformity.
Yes.
You get people just going through the motions without being engaged with it, and that engagement is so much of this. That kind of being in it, on a kind of experiential felt level. And when we disengage from work, first of all, it's soul crushing. It's just grim to experience. And second of all, it means we can do really horrible things
Yeah.
through our work. Because we're disengaged, we're not connected with what we're doing to others through
Exactly.
the work and the consequences, or to ourselves or to the wider world. And that break in engagement for me is actually a really, really serious issue for many people. And it's something I still struggle with. I spent a lot of time disengaged because that was how I was taught, really, to do what was needed
Yeah.
without this ability to step back and explore.
Yeah. I find it such a disservice to oneself and to the work,
Hmm.
mainly because we're, when we're disengaged, our presence is totally not there. And if there's anything that I've seen so far in the relationships that I have, and in the friendships, in the collaborations that I'm working in, the quality of presence is very important.
Hmm.
And if we are disconnected, if we are disengaged, we are not owning the energy that we're bringing in the room. And that's a big disservice. That's a big disservice to our lives. That's a big disservice to those that are around us. And yeah, that's a big disservice to the world,
Hmm.
mainly because the gifts that we bring in are not fully utilized.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think, most of us feel that on some level, even if, again, this isn't and this is right to the heart of the assumption, really. This isn't an external internal thing. It's about those two things together. And
Yeah.
we have a much more refined sense of what's going on than perhaps than we're willing to engage with always, because we've had to cut that off in the past to deal with it. And to be fair, it's not always safe to do that, certainly in the workplace. I know an awful lot of organizations that, whilst they may not officially declare it, do still fundamentally work on a blame culture.
Yeah.
It's blame and reward, basically, and it's those two things together. And it's not a healthy way to run anything, really. And for me, it starts at school too, or even before school potentially, but it particularly starts at school. And you mentioned your kind of this role of education, and for me, there's something really interesting in the difference between education and training. Training is about preparing for something known. Education is about preparing us to explore the unknown. And I think we get an awful lot of training, we get very little education.
And this is also why, for me, it's very important to provide a different framing of when we had our initial conversation around this topic. Was so exciting for me because somehow I all my life I've thought, I feel different. I have things, thoughts that are different from the mainstream, especially growing in the Philippines, you do as you're told. This is what's expected from you. Okay, so I did what was expected. Graduated from one of the best universities. Graduated with honors. So there was more of that. I was going through the motions of life, and at the same time, I was still finding myself feeling lost. Of there is more. There's something else that was missing. And with what you shared about being able to navigate the unknown, I think that was the biggest part of me. I was like, oh, we were taught to value education, yet after university, there was this, okay, so what's next? What do I do? How do I do it? And still the responsibility was there of, oh, but you have to be able to provide. You have to be able to make a decent, not just a decent living. We really have to make a career out of it. So there was this unplaced expectations of, hey, you graduated from one of the best universities. You have to make a mark for yourself, and not being able to know, but what is that mark in the first place?
Yeah, I think it really gets to the this idea of making things happen and us being personally responsible. As we find ourselves in this position where we can act, but the action doesn't line up with how we feel. And it's like, okay, so there's this series of steps I can follow, but this isn't right for me on some felt level, and it doesn't feel right. It's a sense thing, it's an intuitive thing. And I actually, for me, we often misunderstand feelings and misinterpret feelings when we jump straight between, okay, this is the feeling, this is the intuition, and this is what it means in concrete terms, and therefore this is what we do about it. When we join all those up together and we don't give ourselves the opportunity to change them, we react it, not being responsible. And so how do we open up, this ability to respond, and not just individually? I think a really big part of this and this conversation and this assumption is it's my responsibility. I have to figure all this out on my own, and then I can share it with other people. Because if I seem uncertain, then it's going to be a problem. People are going to be afraid, or think less of me, or all of this stuff. And yet, one of the big things I always found as I learned more stuff, I became more uncertain. Actually, is it like this? It's like there's this sphere of knowledge that I held, and actually, as it grows and I get more kind of shove more stuff in it, the surface area of what I don't know also grows. And so I'm actually more aware of what I don't know the more I learn. And I think this idea that we can kind of learn everything and fit it all in and then always know exactly what to do gets to the heart of what's going on in this assumption. And certainly, maybe in theory it's possible at some point in humanity's future, but it certainly isn't the case now.
Yeah, this idea of as the expert, you have to know everything, or you have to know the all the answers to things. It took me a while to drop that. It really took me some time to be able to say, wait a minute, why am I even trapping myself with these expectations of, hey, you have to know everything, that it is your responsibility to be able to answer every question. And that, especially in the Filipino culture, we're so much into saving face, like, oh, you can't show vulnerability, or you can't show that you don't know things, because then you'll lose credibility. So we are actually not just looking at it from a personal lens, but also within the cultural lens. How deep that deeply entrenched all these expectations are. And for me, this was one of the toughest to drop. This notion that I need to know everything to be the expert, or to be even just to call myself an expert. And one of the ways that helped me really take into that is just being a parent. For me, being a parent has given me lots of practice ground in saying, "Oh, wait a minute, I don't know that. let me figure it out, or let's figure it out together." So I think it's like muscle memory. The more that we practice lines like, what you said, I don't fully understand. Can you explain more? Or what you just mentioned is not something that I'm familiar with. Is there a way that I can look it up or find more info about it? Those lines for me is like what I was never taught at all how to use those lines to my advantage.
Mm.
And now I'm like, oh,
Oh, we've had a slight freeze on the stream here. Hopefully, Lana will be back shortly.
there we go.
Lana is back. Good. That was strange.
I was
Okay.
I was just sharing that, yeah, every time that I practice this, allowing myself to explore things outside of what I know allows me to just really deepen the things that I don't know.
I think that idea of it being embodied, muscle memory, as you put it, is absolutely key to this. We do explore the world in ways that aren't entirely abstract and cognitive, and that's a really important way of us relating to the world and knowing the world. That's where this feeling and intuition are actually related to our physical embodied sense, and we can work stuff out in kind of relation to things much more quickly and efficiently than we can in the abstract. We don't have to process the whole thing, and that we can work things out with the physical world and work things out actually physically, between people. We know things between people that no one of us knows. That's the amazing thing, and that's partly why I love this particular format. I don't know what I'm going to say, and I couldn't say it just off the top of my head until I'm having this conversation with someone who's doing the same thing. And there's this amazing magic in that is just, I don't know any other way to access it.
Yeah. And there's also the allowing for emergence to happen is part of this, of this reframing. I was talking to Carlos and Lawrence from Happy Startups. We were having our usual Monday meeting, and then I shared with him there's a book called Emergent Strategy, and we were all like, "Oh, that's what we've been doing all along," Well, really going for emergent strategy, and that for me was also something that was nice to experience this. Um, Getting into, oh, this is my responsibility to make things happen, also allowed me to think of, but what is emerging in the first place, and how do I allow for what is emerging to really fall into place before I take in my next steps.
Yeah, I think that idea of nurturing the change that we want to create, nurturing what we do almost, and approaching ourselves this way too, because I've certainly been very hard on myself. I was taught that that's how you're successful and that's what you need to be, and by very well-meaning people, who have my best interests at heart, and it actually led to all sorts of problems. It led to burnout in the end. I just couldn't carry on working in that way. And a lot of my work since has been this kind of re-exploration and this kind of tangential move to something quite different. And I think, how we approach ourselves and how we approach other people on that physical level, on that more felt level, is actually really quite really important, because we can practice with ourselves and with other people, and the two kind of work together in this positive cycle when it's happening. And it's doing that gives us the space for this kind of change and emergence, because again, it's not one side changing another, it's both sides moving in a direction. And that's a very, very different way, I think, to think about how we act on the world and in the world. And if we think about our responsibility as, well, where am I going and where is this going, rather than what do I have to do to make this specific thing happen, we're in a very different place.
Yeah. And for me, this is also why I love Leo Buscalia's quote, of love is me leading you gently back to yourself. This knowledge that I don't have to do anything more, because that wisdom, that power, that that amazingness is already in there. We just have to reconnect to it. And what my role would be is to show you, to mirror what I'm seeing, and what I, what I see as your strength, so that you will be able to see it for yourself. So
Mm,
this is also what came out for me of, if I look at work, as managers or as team leads, the more that we get into strengths-based approaches, the more that our team will thrive. Mainly because you're giving them that ability to reconnect with their strengths,
mm,
and you're providing that mirror for them to see themselves in a different light.
mm,
And this is also part of that. It is our responsibility to be able to give that to other people, to be able to be that mirror that says, hey, you're beautiful, hey, you're an amazing person. And how do we do that? We do that with all the interactions that we have, with all the connections that we create, even those online.
mm. And I think that that idea of emerging strengths, finding what the strength is, and finding and creating a context where it is a strength is a really important thing, because we've done some work around neurodiversity, and I think neurodiversity is a really interesting area in this, and that for many people they experience their difference, their fundamental difference, as entirely a problem.
Yeah.
And that's not to say it's not a problem. That's not to say there are not issues caused by being neurodiverse, and very real suffering caused by being neurodiverse. But there is also a flip side. There are very often things that it means you can do better than others, but there aren't that pathway. We don't have the right question that can take advantage of that strength. It's only a strength if we can deploy it somehow, direct it somehow to something useful. But what that isn't readily available to us. And I think this also relates to that sense that you were talking about of not quite fitting in, of not quite not having a pathway, not having a way forward to express and to use these things that are you and fully you, in a way that is positive for you and other people. And some people don't experience this. That's absolutely fine too, or don't experience it to a strong degree. They find a pathway. They're the people that think 6 or 7 years old, realize they want to be a doctor or a lawyer, and study all the way through it, and they make an excellent doctor or lawyer, and that is a very satisfying life and career for them. But that not everyone has that available to them for various reasons. But that doesn't mean that they can't make a very significant contribution in their own terms as well. And so I think that's a really important part of it. And how we can create that space for ourselves and for others, I
Yeah.
think, is a really difficult thing to do. It's not something we're told how to do. So I'd be really interested, actually, is if someone is in this, feels like they're in this space, resonates with what we've been saying, what might they start to do? How can they explore this to see what it is for them, and to work with this a little bit?
Yeah. Well, while we were exchanging about the, how it is for organizations, like not all organizations are open to creating provisions for people to learn about their strengths. So it might be that you're limited in certain aspects in your life. However, what I also see and what I've also experienced is it's not always the case for every aspect of your life. So if there's places to explore, then find those places. If it's in your relationship with your partner, if it's in your parenting, if it's in your relationship with your close friends. Um, for me, the pathway was really more of me experiencing it, me challenging it, like what I said, a muscle memory of practicing it. So find those areas in your lives where you can practice this reframing. Where in my life can I not jump in to take full responsibility? Where in my life can I share responsibility with others? Where in my life can I ask others for feedback? um, so these are simple practices that you can begin with, that helps you to open up immediately of, yeah, how am I taking in responsibility? How am I sharing responsibility? How am I encouraging others to also take in their responsibility? If we can do that, just small steps, then we can get into the bigger steps as well.
I like that. I think one of the really important things to realize in all of the change in this kind of space is that it is incremental, it's iterative, and we can't go all the way there.
Yeah.
There isn't an all the way there really anyway. If you try and look what all the way there is, which is one way of looking at meditative practice, actually, is like, what's all the way? And you eventually loop back to, oh, okay, there isn't an all the way. But I think there's something really interesting. One of the reasons I like this idea of challenging assumptions is assumptions feel like mandates. They feel like something we must do. And when we no longer have to do something, we can then take responsibility. We can then change the direction.
Yeah.
So I'd really like to know, what could, if someone resonates with this and, they want to try and play with it a little bit, what could they stop doing? What don't they have to do anymore? If it's not my responsibility, if I'm not at fault, if I don't make a specific thing happen anymore, what can I stop doing? What can I let go of?
Yeah. One of the exercises that I do for myself is figuring out where my full yes lie. So for me, intrinsically, and of like really deeply listening to myself, to my gut, to my body, of, is this a full yes for me? And if it's not a full yes, to explore that further. Of like, I would only say yes to something if it's a full yes for me. This being here today is a full yes. Whatever I get into, if it's not a full yes, I immediately know that it's going to be a problem. So that has been a big strategy. How would you know if it's a full yes? How can you feel it in your body? What does a full yes means? And maybe you can think of the times in your life where you really experience, the joy, the pride, the excitement of being in your full yes. So just try to tap into that. And if it's not, in one of the podcasts that I was in, I also introduced this concept of full yes. And there was not somebody who said, but how would you know if it's a full yes? Then it's an experimentation process. Whenever you say yes to something, try to feel it. How does that feel? How does that feel in your body? How does that feel with your, with your gut? How did you feel while doing it? Was it a drag? Was it something that flowed with ease? Was it something that just really captivated you? So for me, it's that awareness piece. When we're aware of how we get into these spaces in the first place, then it's also easier for us to say, oh, wait a minute, I can't say yes to this. I can't take this in as a responsibility. And it might be that the answer is I can't do that yet. That's also a mind frame for that. It might not be a yes for now. But to offer that, to offer that to someone who's asking, or to offer that for yourself of, okay, if it's not a yes for now, then what is it?
And to allow yourself to not do things that are not a full yes.
Exactly.
Which is a huge thing for many people, and to allow that there might be consequences to doing that. And I think that's one of the really big things, and to allow us to have those consequences sometimes. It's like, I think it's a really interesting thing, with this kind of idea of trying to keep perfectly safe and get everything done and make it, it's like, we can't actually hold on to that, and when we hold on to it too tightly, it gets in the way of us really enjoying it, and it becomes this kind of shrinking, dark, like hard, dry thing with no energy, and it becomes very difficult to sustain that. Then that's the problem, is you can do it, and occasionally you might well need a means to an end. You might well need to say, okay, these are the consequences and that I anticipate, and I'm clear enough on this that whilst this task is not something that's intrinsically worthwhile, it's okay for me to engage with and to do it for the outcome. But the fewer of those things that you have to do, that are there, and the more of the things that really have that full yes in them is a really interesting idea. I think I'd like to explore what a full yes is, how people can look for that a little bit, because I really love the idea. And for me, there's something very interesting in the different parts of the body being sensitive to different things. We're aware and different, we kind of sense in different ways. And it's not that the whole body has to be like, this is amazing and this is the best thing ever.
No.
But that no one part of it is objecting.
Yeah.
No one part of it is. So it's kind of, it's that rather than, and it's okay because some bits are going to contribute more than others as well. And this is a great metaphor for community too. It's okay as long as no one is losing out in this, as long as no one is at risk in this, is going to suffer with this, then that's okay.
Yeah, I did this exercise where I take in a piece of paper and then I fold it in half, and then on the top is yes, and then on the bottom is no, and then I just plot in the activities that I do, and just to use the piece of paper as my gauge. Where do I write each activity? Where are they falling? Is it really very near to the yes? Is it in the middle? Is it very near to the no? So just to help me visualize things. And not just activities, actually, also people, people that I interact with. I think this is also one of the areas to think of, when you think of responsibility, it's also with relationships. So who do I connect with that I feel obligated to? And why is it like that? So it helps in exploring that, who do I connect with? Who do I want to nurture relationships with? Who do I want to explore deeper relationships with? And when I see that piece of paper, it helps me to really relax as well. Of, oh, okay, most of the things that I'm doing in life are yeses, or I might be able to see, oh, there's no's in some areas, and then it becomes a place to explore. Why is that a no for me? What is it that I need? Some oftentimes there's just more of a assurance, or confidence, or safety. Now, those are things that might come up in terms of the needs around it. But then by being able to vocally express that, if it's with regards to a colleague or a project that I'm working on, being able to express that gives me also clarity of, does it stay in the no, or is there a possibility of making it in a yes?
And I think that's actually the root of asking some really good questions, and raising it makes the thing work better when we're dealing with these complex and messy things, because there's a validity in the objection. There's something to explore there, and being able to explore that and working with people, forming relationships with people who are willing to explore that and who aren't threatened by that is a huge thing. And also as a leader, as a community holder, creating that space where that's okay and modeling that for other people as well, being vulnerable and being able to be questioned, and to explore, to co-explore. And I think, it's a really powerful way of relating to the world, and also I think perhaps inviting that when we sense that in other people.
Yes.
Because for many of us, we kind of, it's almost rude to say, to mention that someone seems doubtful in some way. And I think actually inviting people to share their doubts is a really important part of coming to a really good, positive intersection of overlap, and where we can really work together in that wholehearted way.
I it's great that you've mentioned this. I was already thinking about how we introduce the full yes with our kids. Here in the Netherlands, there's this commercial for a drink, wherein the guy would just say, which one do you want, this or this? And then the guy would just say, just whatever, and it starts with a haircut, like, oh, just whatever. And then he just gets a reverse mohawk. And then when he was buying a house, and the real estate agent said, oh, what kind of house? Oh, just whatever. So it went on, and whenever that commercial comes in, we point it out to our kids. It's like, this is what happens when you're not in a full yes. You just tell, just whatever, and then you get,
Well,
whatever.
you get whatever.
Yeah, and that became a language, that they started with. They were very young when we started that, but now when we sense that, like, when they're deciding on certain things, it's easier for us to then also say, hey, wait a minute, I'm sensing that it's not a full yes for you.
Mm,
And that is another piece, another layer to this. When we can for ourselves gauge what the full yes is, it's also easier to spot it in others.
mm,
It becomes also a part of the interaction of, hey, this for me is a full yes. Is this also a full yes for you? It becomes
mm,
that invitation. So,
mm,
so for me, it has worked in a lot of ways, of in the relationships that I have, in the friendships that I have, and also with work, of being able to know that behind my no, there's a deep, there's a deep reason. And people that I work with understand that my no means something,
mm,
and then it becomes a place of us exploring what that no means.
mm,
So it gets you into a deeper layer as well in your relationships, when you have that ability to say no to things and still be um respected, and still be understood, and still be accepted.
mm,
But that comes in when, when you understand why you're saying yes in the first place.
mm. And I think that's really important, and that trust, that for me, that is on some level, the essence of trust is that even if we don't share the perspective, we understand that it's valid, and we can view it as other person's perspective as valid, and the developing that trust and doing so in that way is absolutely key to all of the themes we've talked about. And without trust, we can't have responsibility. Without trust, we can't make things happen very effectively.
Yeah.
Without trust, we can't. We're in this kind of constant state of fear and anxiety, and we can't ever relax into ourselves and our own being either. And so I think we're just coming to the end now, but yeah, that theme, I think, that we can replace this need to do with trust as a really fascinating thing to kind of, for me, to take away and explore further as well. So I love the fact that we never quite finish these conversations. We finish the hour, but we never finish the conversation.
It's like, it's layers, right? And you
Yeah,
were filling in layers.
absolutely. um, Thank you so much for being part of this conversation today. I really enjoyed it, and really, everyone has a different feel, and I particularly enjoy this, the depth that we got to in this conversation. So thank you very much for bringing that to this space.
My
If
pleasure.
someone if someone wants to carry on and maybe continue this conversation with you on a different level, I think LinkedIn is the best way for them to get in touch with you. Is that correct?
Yes. You can always look
Lovely.
it up at Lana Jelenjev in LinkedIn.
Super. Okay, there's a link if you would like to do that on the show notes. So please do send Lana a message and carry on this conversation and engage. Similarly with me, LinkedIn, or through any of the comments or anything, I'd love to continue this conversation as well. And I hope this has raised some thoughts for you and got you to kind of ask questions for yourself and to other people. So yeah, please do get in touch if that's been the case. The next episode, which I think is really interesting, and I love when these kind of line up in these strange ways. The next episode is It Takes Two People to Have a Conversation. And I think where we're talking about the words that we use and the language that we use and how that helps us build trust and how that helps us really connect, that's absolutely what we're going to be getting into next week, I hope. I'm going to be talking to Daniela Rozoka about that, and that will be taking place at 1 p.m. on Wednesday next week, which is Wednesday the 13th, 1 p.m. UK time, Wednesday the 13th of January. So I'd love to see you there live. It would be great to have you as a guest again. Please do share anything about this with anyone else. This all spreads through word of mouth, and particularly share your thoughts and your feelings and your questions about this. It's not about really, knowing this stuff. Explore it with someone else, that in a new way, what it opened up for you. Because for me, that's what's really important. That's how this stuff really spreads and creates really positive change. Thank you so much for joining me, Lana. It was a wonderful conversation.
My pleasure. And yeah, looking forward to the comments or the questions and the explorations that that can happen after this.
Definitely. No, I hope it'll nurture some really interesting some conversations. So thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to go out there and create some delightful dissent of yourself. Goodbye.